Hello and welcome back to the Fiction Hack podcast, where we attempt to deepen our appreciation of the modern story. My name is Colin Munro, and this is
Ross Lawhead. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You always say that, but you're as much the host.
I'm always grateful.
I guess being grateful is a good thing.
Yeah.
But there's no need for you to be grateful here.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay, so what are we talking about this week, Ross?
Well, since Ant-Man's being released in a few days from when this is going to be put up. Ant-Man and the Wasp, sorry. Yeah, I should make that distinction. I thought we'd just talk about Ant-Man and the history of Ant-Man and the Wasp, just for people who might not know. Because as people who are listening may not know, I am a huge comic book nerd, and I say that proudly. I think there's a lot of Me Tooism with comic books right now. Like, everybody wants to be a nerd and a geek, and oh yeah, I used to really be into Spider-Man when I was little. And, maybe they were, but maybe they just went to a friend's house and read a lot of Spider-Man, or watched the Spider-Man cartoon or something like that. But no, I bought my first... You were
like proper hardcore.
I still am. I bought my first superhero comic book in 1993, and I have been buying comics basically every week since then. So I've had thousands and thousands of them in the course of my life, which I've had to sell at different points.
It's like 25 years. That's a quarter of a century.
I know, it's freaking me out, because I bought Fantastic Four number 362 as my first superhero comic book, and I'm still a huge Fantastic Four fan. And they got canceled for a couple of years, but they're going to relaunch it again, and they're going to be into issue 700 or so pretty soon. So I would have read like half of the Fantastic Four comic books would have come out in my lifetime, and that kind of blows my mind a little bit. But
and
I can also
had a secret Fantastic Four project for a while. Is that something you want to talk about, or is that something you don't want to talk about?
I do want to talk about it because it's not a secret.
Okay. Oh, is it not? But I thought you were doing it.
It's still going.
Okay. Well. Oh, right. Okay. Well. But you were okay. So you're writing a blog about Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Right. And but I thought you were doing it semi-anonymously.
I guess I probably was at the beginning, because I wasn't telling a lot of people about it, because I was also doing my author blog for my book, and I thought there might be a little bit of confusion and stuff between those two things, but nobody would have cared anyway.
Okay, so tell us where we can find that.
So it's ff1by1.com, and it's I'm just reading every single issue of Fantastic Four in sequence and writing a little kind of report on it, a sort of critique, just on the characterization and the plots and all that kind of stuff. So I'm up to issue 176. I haven't done it for a while because I'm a bit swamped at the moment, but I am. It is still a live thing, so I'll keep posting as I keep reading the comic books. Cool. And people can check it out. I think it also got to be more traffic than my author blog, just because just the SEO was able to be optimized in such a way that basically nobody else is reviewing Fantastic Four issue 122. So if you type in Fantastic Four issue 122, then I'm it. There's no other articles about it. So people would kind of come in that way, and then they'd poke around a little bit. And there's another guy who's kept citing me as a source in some sort of dissertation that he was writing online, called Fantastic Four: The Great American Novel. So yeah. Well,
it definitely sounds like Fantastic Four is at least one other episode that we should do.
Oh yeah, at least one. But yeah.
Now,
so
see, I'm again. Yeah. My role in this podcast is to be the stupid guy that doesn't really know anything. So Ross brings all the content. I just am the layman who sits here and goes, "Oh right," and I do the editing and stuff. I know very, very little about Fantastic Four. All I know, in fact, it was the terrible movie that they made. The first terrible movie that they made. Well, then I think the second one, they did another one that was better. Or did they do
a series of bad movies, and so we shouldn't talk so much about this.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
The reason there are so many bad Fantastic Four movies is that every single Fantastic Four movie, except one, was done just to keep the rights to Fantastic Four. And so they were done as rush jobs, usually on a very low budget, and as a result, they suck. But
okay, well, let's talk more about that in a future episode.
Yeah.
But before we get into this episode's,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about last week. Last week we were talking about Chekhov's gun,
Yeah.
but we ended up talking mostly about
The mystery box.
the mystery box. But that kind of ties in quite well, so that's fine. One
Yeah.
thing though that a friend of mine at work was telling me that we forgot to mention is the whole Chekhov's gun reference in the movie Shaun of the Dead.
Oh.
You remember there
Yeah.
was like there's literally a gun on the wall in the pub, and
Yeah.
they don't know, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think it's a real gun. It's not going to work." And so they like took it literally as a gun, and they didn't think it would work. And then sort of, well, spoiler alert, it does work.
Well, you remember the name of the pub as well, right?
No, I don't.
The Winchester.
Oh,
which
right,
is
which is
the type of
Oh yeah,
gun.
that is the gun that it was.
Yeah, so they're trying to
It-
get to the gun all through the movie, basically, just so they
Right.
can fire it. Yeah, no, that's good. I hadn't actually put that together. I like that. And yeah, I mean, Edgar Wright is a smart enough filmmaker that he would know that and put that in deliberately. That fits in really well with our kind of a subject for this week, which is Ant-Man and the Wasp, because Edgar Wright put into pre-production the Marvel Studios Ant-Man movie, even though he wasn't the director who eventually followed through on it. He was, for a long time, it was with him, and I think Marvel Studios has had kind of as much kind of director dispute and turnover as most of the other studios, and people are always down on the DC movies because they're always
You're trying
cycling through
not
the
to say
directors.
Star Wars
And
there, aren't you?
sorry.
You're trying not to say Star Wars.
I am, but it's true as well because Star Wars again. Josh Trank was going to be doing a Boba Fett movie, and he got removed after an unfortunate tweet that he sent out. But yeah, DC
Right. So
also.
all I knew is I just noticed Edgar Wright's name in the credits when I saw the movie. I didn't realize that he was originally down to direct it and then got sort of fired or dropped or.
Yeah, Ant-Man was going to be one of the first of the Phase 1 Marvel movies. I think it was going to sit between probably Thor and Captain America. But they just, for whatever reason, and again, like I say, Marvel Studios, I think it's got the same amount of conflict as just about any other studio, but they're not kind of open about it, and you don't really hear from it. I think it's because they kind of play nice, because Edgar Wright, he says, there have been difficulties and disputes, but they're all handled in a very gentlemanly fashion, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no animosity really, and it must have been that. So I can only think, this is only conjecture, so don't hold me to this, but Edgar Wright has got such a distinct kind of voice, such a strong voice, I should say, in all his movies, just about how it's paced, about how the characters develop through it, that I think he was having a little bit of difficulty kind of meshing with a studio boss, Kevin Feige, who I think is great, who has kind of a larger view of how this movie needs to fit in with the rest of the movies in the franchise. So that's the only thing I can think of that would have led to that friction, because watching Ant-Man, the first Ant-Man movie, it does feel like it would be right up Edgar Wright's alley.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw his name in the credits, it really made sense.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the comedy.
Yeah, and so I think he was still doing it when Paul Rudd was attached to it. I don't know when the switch happened. And watching it is kind of like a little bit out of time because it doesn't tie into the other movies so well. It really could fall anywhere in the phases. And people are saying this new one doesn't even really kind of tie in with Infinity War, which
Apparently
I think
it's before. It's set before Infinity War.
Yeah, so I think it's between Civil War. So you see him kind of getting out of the prison that he was put in with the other splintered group Avengers. And then, it kind of takes off from there. And I haven't seen any more than the trailers or anything like that. But yeah, then I think I would assume that it would cover the ground between Civil War and Infinity War. And yeah, maybe take us right up to maybe seeing people disappearing. I don't know. People are saying maybe not, but we'll have to see because it's not been released yet, and we're not really reviewers, so we're not getting any free tickets yet. But We'll try to change that with this episode.
Yes.
Get on the list.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So where do I start with this? So, okay, Edgar Wright. But there are still kind of flavors and touches of Edgar Wright throughout the movie.
Totally.
And, Peyton Reed is, he's a funny guy, and he's really kind of taking ownership of the character, and I think he's a very good director. But I think a lot of people look at the fight in the briefcase as they're falling through the air, and then... what is it? The Yellow Jacket guy says, "I'm going to destroy you," and then the phone comes on with "Destroy" by what's the group, The Jam or something like that.
That's very Edgar Wright.
With Edgar Wright, his kind of you look at something like Baby Driver, where he has really integrated the music very well in the action sequences, especially. People are saying that's a pure Edgar Wright moment. So yeah, he was attached to it early on, and it just kind of got dragged along until they replaced a director, and then it was able to kind of actually put it out. So infer from that what you will, but that's kind of how it started. But do you want to talk about the comic character, or keep talking about the movies, or what would you like to follow right now?
Well, yeah, I guess so. You're really into the comics, so that's how you started this. So what? Tell us about the comics. How was it? Yeah, tell us about the comics.
So, in the same way that Ant-Man was kind of the first of the Marvel movies to be put into production, even though it was released kind of late, Ant-Man was a very early comic book character from the 60s. And he was actually created before the Avengers. He was a founding Avenger, which is why they wanted to have him, I think, in the first rank of the Phase 1 movies, so that they could have him in the Avengers movie. And I think he probably... it would have added an interesting dimension to the entire dynamic. But, it works pretty well anyway. So I'm being reliably informed through my research that the first issue was January 1962, and he appeared in a comic book called Tales to Astonish, which was a anthology comic series. So you'd buy the comic Tales to Astonish, and there'd be maybe 3 or 4 kind of short stories that would usually hinge on some sort of surprise twist ending about someone being an alien, or the people who you think were the normal people were the aliens, or some revenge scenario as well. It was kind of a holdover from the EC Comics era, which led to a whole controversy about are comic books appropriate for children, because they've got all these kind of dark elements in them. So there was a little bit of self-policing that had gone on. And so Marvel at that point was still publishing Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales, which later had Doctor Strange and S.H.I.E.L.D. in it, and Amazing Fantasy, which had the first appearance of Spider-Man in the 15th issue, along with a few other kind of anthology tales. And it was at these got kind of... Strange Tales as well had Iron Man in it as his first appearance. And Marvel was kind of riding the wave that they had started with Fantastic Four as their first of the new superhero comics, which was hugely popular. And so they started to look around for, well, what other superheroes are there? What can we use? And so they started to transition some of these surprise kind of thrilling tales stories and introduce more superheroes in them as a kind of way to try ideas out. And Ant-Man was one of those ideas that was tried out. And in fact, there was a story called, I think it was something like The Man in the Anthill, which was one of these kind of supernatural revenge tales. Some guy like steps on an insect or something, and then he gets transformed to insect size, and then the insects have their revenge on him. The last panel is like him getting dragged into an anthill, and they're gonna like eat him or something like that.
When a layman like me hears Ant-Man, I just think, well, hang on a minute. There was Batman, and then they did Spider-Man, and they're just thinking, oh, what other animal can we put man after? Next it will be Deer Man, and then Crab Man. Yeah, well, it's held them in. There's a pretty good track record. I mean, Wolverine. You don't even have to stop there. But I mean, you can say that, and I think
I think a really interesting question as well to go along with that is, well, why do these things work? Like, why not? I mean, okay, like, yeah, of course, there's a lot of Me Tooism and copycatting, Spider-Man, Ant-Man, The Wasp. It's like, yeah, let's just do
but they're all very
all the
different.
bugs.
The way that the story, the way they explain it. So none of,
Yeah.
I mean.
But why are they
Batman-
popular, I think, is another question
Yeah.
to ask. It's like, why do people like to read about animal-themed superheroes? I think,
Yeah.
because
Well, I guess-
you could go back into mythology, and because there are a lot of kind of supernatural creatures that we associate with animals. Look at werewolves in sort of Norse mythology. There's a lot of kind of people who can transform into bears or send their consciousness into bears, and it is something that we're trying to figure out about. I think the natural world.
I guess like we've always been aware, like as a human race, we've always been aware that certain animals have got certain abilities that we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So when thinking about supernatural abilities,
Yeah.
The animal kingdom is a natural place to go.
I think so. And looking at the legend of the werewolf, I think it's also people trying to figure out, well, where does an animal stop and a human being begin, really? Because on the one hand, there's a lot about human nature, which is very animalistic, and then there's a lot about animals, which are very sophisticated in terms of societies and stuff. And you can look at wolves as having very structured societies as well, to a degree. And again, that'd be a great another episode to discuss. In any case, I think there is something more behind, why we think that a guy dressing up as a bat is a cool idea. Beyond just the visuals, I think. But why it's
well, in Ant-Man, at least in the movie, there isn't really much reference to the animal of an ant, other than the fact that he can make himself small.
He can make himself small. Well, he uses them as well.
Really does he? Does he communicate with?
He communicates. He rides around on one, which again is from the comic book. And
does he do that in the movie?
Yeah, he does that in the movie. You got to see the movie again if you've not remembered this.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
The whole heist at the end has got ants getting into the computer machines and making new connections or bringing them down and all that. So they've worked him in pretty well. But even in the comics, it's a stretch to actually have him use any ant to any real degree, because that was a part of his character early on, that he's got this helmet that can communicate with ants. And in the comics, it is the helmet. Totally, that's kind of its only function. But yeah, and I think this is why the character of Ant-Man didn't really take off, because there hasn't been an ongoing series of Ant-Man like there has been for Spider-Man, for instance, or
and dozens of reboots,
or Captain America or Thor. Yeah, there have been a lot of the character's gone through a lot of iterations, we can call it, which we'll discuss as well. But with Ant-Man, was starting out from the 60s. I mean, he predates the Avengers, which came along in 1963. So once Marvel had kind of a bunch of characters that had been tested, basically, and worked out, because even Thor didn't start in his own comic book. He was... What was he? Tales of Suspense, I believe, was Thor, and the Hulk was something else I can't really remember at the time. They decided, okay, well, we'll just collect all these characters, feature them together in a kind of a Justice League ripoff, which Justice League had been going on for quite a while at that time. And we'll try to get a little bit of play so that these guys can, we'll have these crossover stories so that, you can read this Avengers story. It's got Loki in it, and then we'll have Loki appear in Thor's stories, try to help him launch his own series and all that kind of deal. So there was some blatant marketing going on at that time. And I think for a lot of reasons, Ant-Man just didn't really stick like Thor, Captain America, Iron Man did. Even though they had all pretty much had the same launch in terms of marketing and format. I think there is something a little bit ridiculous about Ant-Man. I think there's a I read a quote at some point, I couldn't find it, about Stan Lee saying that he didn't feel like Ant-Man was ever illustrated correctly, in that, you would, when he was shrunk down and small, they just show him without anything by him to show any sort of scale. So you couldn't actually visually imagine what it would be like to be Ant-Man, because they weren't showing you what it was like. So that was kind of cited as one reason why Ant-Man didn't really get the traction that the rest of them did. Mm-hmm. And basically, he just hung around the Avengers. So he was in the title with the Wasp, who was introduced alongside him, I guess, a couple years later. And so they would be Avengers, but they never had their own kind of solo adventures.
I guess when you're in the Avengers, it's pretty easy to get upstaged.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Because there's, so many great characters.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think as a gimmick, they turned him into Giant Man as well. That was a couple years later. They figured, well, if he can shrink really small and then enlarge himself, why can't he just go the other direction with these, these scientific Pym particles that we've invented? And so, so they called him Giant Man, which I think is pretty clever, because it's Ant-Man, because you've still got Ant-Man in there. So, and again, I don't know if it was just the character, if maybe the character was kind of too vanilla, because I mean, nobody knows who Ant-Man is now, unless they have seen the movie. You can't say, tell me about Ant-Man. Why is he Ant-Man? I mean, even in the movie, they don't really kind of go into great depth about Michael Douglas's character and why he actually did all this stuff, except that he was kind of the Shield guy.
Is the character of Ant-Man in the movie? Is that the same story, or was Ant-Man, the original Ant-Man, the Michael Douglas character?
The original Ant-Man was Henry Pym, who is played by Michael Douglas in the movie.
Right, so this is like Ant-Man, the Next Generation, kind of. Yeah,
which again is from the comics. So the second Ant-Man, Scott Lang, he was introduced in the late 70s or 80s. And he was pretty much the same character, who... I think we should probably back up. One of the things which... Because I think it was so hard... Because I think they wanted Ant-Man to work. I'm talking about Marvel Comics. They wanted Ant-Man to work. They kept trying to change and see, well, how can we make this character work? If we made him really big, would people be interested in him? If we made him, if we called him Yellow Jacket, would people be interested in him? If we gave him a different personality, if we gave him a sidekick, if we did this, we did that. They kept kind of trying to poke and prod this character into new shapes. It got to the point where that actually became a part of his personality, and that kind of carries on to the movie a little bit as well, is that he is kind of unstable as a person, and he's gone through a lot of these different kind of personality changes more than any other superhero really has. And so, they just decide, well, he's a schizophrenic. I think at one point he actually breathes in something that makes him a little bit crazy, and so he calls himself Yellow Jacket, and he says, hey, I'm here. I'm a new superhero, and everybody, all the other Avengers are like, "But you're Hank Pym. Like, you're not a different person." He's like, "Yeah, no, I totally am a new person." So that's kind of an interesting kind of character trait. But then again, it works against you in a comic series, because you can't really pick up an Ant-Man comic and know who he is anymore. Like, you can't, Superman is Clark Kent, Batman is Bruce Wayne. Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and
and it's their
when you say Clark Kent, when you say Bruce Wayne, when you see Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, you know who those characters are. When you say Hank Pym, like, nobody knows who or what that is.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's because of that reason, is because there was never really the firm characterization that happened with that character. So that is something which carried on to the movie, which gave that a different kind of complexion. And also introducing the idea of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that there was still stuff happening between the Captain America movie and the first Iron Man movie in terms of superheroics and the military trying to weaponize these kind of ideas of one person going in to fight a war. So in that, then the original Ant-Man is a kind of a war vet, which is never a part of his history in the comics.
Right.
So there's that, and then there's Scott Lang, which again is pretty much the same from the comics, and he's been the Ant-Man kind of the longest at this point. So if you see him coming in during the 80s, then that's some what are we up to now? That's some almost 40 years that he's been Ant-Man, and he was a burglar, a thief that reformed and still wanted to lead a kind of thrill-seeking lifestyle. So I can't remember if I think he stole
in the movie universe. It's more like that than this 80s version with the criminal, because he was a criminal, right?
He was a criminal in the comics.
He helped him escape out of prison. And
no, it wasn't. I don't think it was. Maybe it was like that. I don't know. I should have read these.
I think he was
somewhere.
in jail, and the ants came along and gave him the Ant-Man suit.
Wait, are you talking about the movie or the comic now?
No, in the movie.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. So I think
this is like the 80s version.
In the movie, it's kind of muddled, and I think this is. You're seeing kind of the stress of a lot of revisions on the script taking place, because I was never clear in the movie, and watching it a dozen times afterwards, I think it's still a bit unclear as to how much of a criminal Scott Lang actually is. Because on the one hand, they say that there's only one crime that he got convicted of, and that was he uncovered some white-collar crime that was taking place in his own company, and so he got into the computer system and changed some things around so that the money got donated somewhere, in a kind of a Robin Hood act. Right. But only that is kind of told, and you get the impression from that is like, okay, well, here's a good guy. He's got a conscience, but he's also got kind of a kind of shady side, which will say, I'm not going to go to the police and tell people about this, but I'm going to do kind of go a different route in correcting this wrong. And so we'll say that that's very noble, that's a heroic thing to do, even though he didn't follow the law.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you've got him in with a society of other kind of criminals, and they're always asking him, well, just do one more job, just do another job. And it's like, well, he's only ever done one job, and he didn't do that with a crew, and he wasn't a part of any sort of criminal community.
Yeah.
And then you've got his wife down on him for what, really? Okay, it's irresponsible maybe to have done this and then get caught for it. But to hear her talk about it, you would think that he had always been living kind of a criminal lifestyle, whereas actually that's not what we're told has actually happened to him in the movie. And then you've got the dimension of her kind of marrying a cop guy, which would be an interesting dynamic if Scott Lang was a career criminal. But we're told that he's not a career criminal in the movie. We're told that he only righted one wrong by doing a minor wrong himself. So, like I say, I think that gets a bit confused. I actually like the idea that he is more of a criminal person and is, trying to do the right thing, and trying to figure out what the right thing is to do, rather than just this kind of noble person who did this semi-wrong thing once to correct a bigger wrong kind of thing. So, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the movie coming up. But before we do, why don't you catch us up on what happened. Where did the original movie leave Ant-Man, and then what happened to him in the other Avengers movies that have come between?
Sure. Yeah, so he's only made 2 appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe out of the... let's see. This is going to be movie number 20, so this will be his third appearance. He was introduced in just Ant-Man, and that took him from, as you say, just a ne'er-do-well, who was kind of enticed by Hank Pym, or enlisted by Hank Pym to kind of steal as a kind of trial. It's still kind of muddled. There's a bit of I think there's a couple plot holes there. But, given the Ant-Man suit, given training in how to use it and be Ant-Man so that they could get into this, do a little bit of corporate espionage, basically, and shut down an operation that was going to give the Ant-Man technology to someone who was very ruthless in how he was going to use it. That was basically that's basically the synopsis of the first movie. During that, he's helped by Hope Pym, who was semi-created for the movies. She was introduced in comics in a kind of split-off alternate universe, but that was never really canon. But now that
So is that the daughter played by Evangeline Lilly?
So this is the Wasp character played by Evangeline Lilly as Hope Pym. who is now a romantic interest with Scott Lang, which is not in the comics at all. But it works for the movies. It works great for the movies. And so now she's the Wasp in the upcoming movie. And we got a little bit of that in the post-credit scene where she's showed her new costume, what will become her costume that her dad, Hank Pym, is working on so that she can be the Wasp. And she says, finally. And that finally that she says... kind of symbolizes a couple things, because this is also the first time that we're getting a female name in the title. No other Marvel Cinematic Universe movie in all the previous 19 has got a female character titled anywhere. But then we're going to get Captain Marvel, who's going to be the first solo titled superhero who's a female, which again is about time. And it's taken a while for us to get a black superhero also. That's a headliner. But
that's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode. We could do basically an episode on each superhero movie that comes out. Yeah. But so I mean, it's all kind of tangled together. So the only other thing that you need to know going into this would be what happens in Civil War, which is that Captain America enlists Ant-Man basically to help him to further his own goals, essentially. Basically, as someone to help steal an airplane, which is what it all boils down to. There's a big confrontation in the Berlin airport or something like that, where the superheroes all line up. And the only real development that we get, there's just two developments. First, we get Giant-Man. No, it's not Giant-Man. Giant Man. It's not like his last name, Giant-Man, like Goldman or something.
You mean Ant-Man just big?
Yeah, so we get the two developments. We get Giant Man being introduced. So he decides that he's going to create a distraction by making himself huge so that Captain America can slip away with Bucky and they can go to Russia. And then following that, he's arrested by the army, I guess, and sent to a prison that's in the middle of the ocean. And so, that's going to look bad in his parole meeting, I'm sure. And I think that's pretty much where the second movie picks up, is the fallout from that. So this is a guy who's been kind of treading the line of trying to stay out of jail, but also do some shady corporate espionage while being a superhero at the same time, and trying to be a responsible father. He gets arrested in a very kind of public way, doing some pretty shady stuff with Captain America, who at that point was doing criminal activity essentially as well. So it's a good setup. I've got really no kind of idea where the movie's going to go. The villain that they're using is actually from the comics, mostly an Iron Man villain called the Ghost, who kind of, now I think about it, they enlist to do sort of corporate espionage as well, stealing secrets. And the idea is that this ghost person can phase through walls, so he can go anywhere. He's a computer genius, can break through any firewalls, real walls, all that stuff. And he's also a Thunderbolt character for a little while, which is a kind of the Suicide Squad of the Marvel Universe. But with this new one, they've made that character female and probably more sympathetic, knowing Marvel Studios. So, I kind of like that dynamic of two kind of corporate espionage characters facing off against each other.
Yeah. So is Edgar Wright involved in this one, or is that...
No, I would think that he's clear of it. I mean, this one's being directed by Peyton Reed, who did the first one as well. And who also contributed to Civil War, from what I understand, in a kind of a character consultant kind of capacity. So I don't know, it should feel kind of like the same, should have the same feel of the first one. Hopefully you'll have a few laughs. Michael Pena's character...
Definitely at the time it came out, it was by far the funniest movie in the Marvel Universe. Wasn't it?
Well, I think Guardians of the Galaxy had come out before. And that was
that had come
obviously
out before.
for laughs. But, the Guardians was really good, but it didn't interact with kind of the. I mean, it was only on Earth like one scene at the very beginning, so you didn't really have. And yeah, I mean, how much of the Guardians are they? They're not really the kind of typical superheroes that we imagine. You know, they've got their outfits, but they're not like costumes in any sense. So this is the first time that we kind of got a Marvel costume superhero that was played for laughs, but it still had, you know, an emotional storyline to tie it all down. And I think, yeah, it did set the tone for something like Spider-Man later, the Spider-Man Homecoming. You can kind of draw a line between those two, I think. And you know, of course, you know, Iron Man is always very quippy and, you know, has got a lot of jokes and stuff, but the jokes are never really integrated into the storyline like they have been with Ant-Man. And again, you know, whether that's you know, Edgar Wright's touch, is probably him and probably Peyton Reed as well as the script writers and all that kind of thing. And of course, Kevin Feige would have, you know, been very clear on the tone that he wants for his movies. So it's of course it's a movie, it's collaborative. It's not ever comes down to just one person. And I mean, even just casting Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, of course you're going to be getting some jokes and some, you know, somebody with that history and timing and stuff. So yeah. Did I cover it? Did I talk enough about the Wasp? Yeah. Do you want to know more about her? Because in the comics, she's still Janet Van Dyne, who is mentioned briefly in the first one, I think. I don't know if it's by name.
So in the comics, she's not the daughter of him?
No. So in the comics, we see her in the movie briefly in some old footage of some caper that Ant-Man and then this other sidekick, the Wasp, were on. And she's going to be played by Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie as the original Wasp. So even in the movie universe,
hang on a minute. The Wasp is not the daughter, or is it? It's the mother.
It's both of them. This is what I'm saying.
Right.
So even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are two Wasps. The one that we've got now.
In terms of this, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's like whoever's wearing the suit, really. Kind of.
No, because there's a new suit as well. It probably should be called Ant-Man and the Wasps, because we're going to have...
Ant-Men and the Wasp.
Well, I don't know if we've got the original Ant-Man back yet, but there's going to be one Ant-Man.
He's in it. He just doesn't really do any anting.
Well, I mean, is he the Ant-Man if he doesn't put the suit on?
Yeah.
He doesn't do any anting. So
because he has all the history of it, you know. He's got, you know, he's the one who was guiding him through it at the beginning, right? Yeah. So he's still Ant-Man.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with you on that. I think he has to put on the suit to be Ant-Man, but it's a matter of opinion, I guess.
Well, maybe he will. Maybe that's something that we will see in
that'd be cool. I'd be for that. But yeah, in the comics, it's still Janet Van Dyne, who is kind of on again, off again with Henry Pym, depending on whether he's alive sometimes. they have killed him off a couple times. And also he's, as I was saying earlier, he you know, they gave him this kind of schizophrenic personality as it went on, and they're able to deal with some more adult themes in comics. Just even in the late 90s, he got to be a very abusive character towards her. And we can talk about the Ultimate comics at some point as well, which is where most of the movies are taking their cues from, especially the Avengers, from a tone and story point of view. Yeah, he did. He was extremely abusive towards the character of Janet Van Dyne. So, yeah, it's a bit of a muddled. In the same way, he's a muddled character. It's a bit of a muddled history with him and the Wasp in the comics. The Wasp, she is kind of more of a middle of the road superhero. You know, have a very strong moral sense. Doesn't really have this kind of ambiguity to her personality, and has often led the Avengers in the same way Captain America has. Yeah, Captain America or Thor will leave, or Iron Man will leave, and often she's kind of stepped up to be a leader. So she's got some real character chops in the Marvel comics. And
now, as I remember, she was mentioned in the first Ant-Man movie, but as somebody who they were on a mission together. Yeah. And she made herself go so small,
right,
subatomic, that she couldn't come back again.
Yes,
right.
No, this is what I was saying. Is that she is mentioned in the first movie,
right? So if they're going to bring her back, she must have survived being really, really small for 30 years.
Yeah. No, completely. And this is why some of us nerds are excited about this, because you're seeing another aspect of a kind of molecular dimension that is in the comics now being kind of canonized in the movies. So, I think,
well, it's smaller than. Sorry to be a nerd, science nerd, but it's smaller than molecules. It's like, isn't it subatomic?
In the comics, there is a thing called a microverse where you get to be so small that you basically enter a different dimension. And it's more of a plot convenience than anything else, because obviously if you go so small that you go between the molecules, well, you're stuck between the two molecules that you happen to be between. But if you go into this other microverse, then you can meet all the other characters that have gone so small that they've entered into this other dimension. And the Fantastic Four have been there. I think Hulk, for some reason, fetched up in the microverse. They even had a comic book called The Micronauts for a little bit, which I believe is all happening in the same place. So, so people are wondering, is this quantum realm going to be the same as the microverse, essentially? And that only means something if, like me, you've been reading comic books for 25 years of your life. Otherwise, it's kind of it doesn't really mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
But so hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about that, because you're right, because we got Michelle Pfeiffer coming back as the person who disappeared into that before. And we also saw Ant-Man at the end of the first movie start to go that direction also, but then kind of pull out of it to re-enlarge himself. Yeah,
didn't he need to get through a really small crack and then...
Yeah. So the idea being, and I don't think this is good science at all, I think the Ant-Man movies are pretty bad science, especially since there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the density of objects once they've been expanded or shrunk.
Yeah, and also, like, they treat... Sometimes you treat a whole car as one object, when a car is thousands and thousands of separate parts.
Sure.
So how does the science of whatever it is that makes you small know that to reduce the whole car, including the wheels and the windscreen wipers, all together and nothing else?
I think that's covered in the movies, because it's the problem that Cross has in trying to shrink down organic objects. They just become a little kind of smear on the ground. The only thing, it's not explained, but what it looks like is that you need to have the suit that's completely sealed in order for it to kind of shrink you. But you're absolutely right about so the pin particles land on a car, and why doesn't the bumper just get big instead of the whole car and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because I watched the trailer and there's like car scenes, I think, where
but also when Ant-Man shrinks down, it's like, well, you've got the same mass, you've got the same density, and so you can still throw a punch like a normal person, and you can still kind of flip people over. But Hank Pym is carrying around a tank in his pocket. Why doesn't that have the same weight and punching power of a tank? He shouldn't be able to even pick it up. So they're playing a little bit fast and loose with the science. But it's all in good fun, I guess. Although it might be worth pointing out that in the comic books that was never a thing. So when Ant-Man was the size of an ant, he was basically as strong as an ant would be. So he didn't have any kind of powers beyond that. The Wasp kind of got powers kind of folded into her. She kept using the explanation is that she kept using the Pym particles so much that they just became a part of her biology, and so she can just do it at will.
Which you need a suit.
Fine. Doesn't need a suit. No. No.
Okay.
And in fact, that was kind of a character thing as well. It's like she kept changing her suit so much that they said, well, she's a bit of a fashionista, so she's been always the trendy Avenger. She was always going out shopping and buying new clothes and stuff, and then they would give her a new costume every couple years or so. Which again, why not? You're a superhero. Why do you have to have the same sweaty costume for decades? Why can't you just kind of spice things up a bit?
Yeah. So when is the movie out?
Movie is out on, I guess, Thursday, Friday, whenever movies usually come out.
So this week. Okay, great.
Yeah.
You got any other plans this week? What are you reading at the moment, or watching? Anything interesting?
The fifth season of S.H.I.E.L.D. just went up on Netflix, so I'm going through that. I loved season 4. They kind of lost me mid-season 3. And even 2 was a bit shaky for me. But no, I'm huge into that show now. And I'm halfway through that book I was telling you about, the Ursula Le Guin Left Hand of Darkness book. It's really interesting, and it's a bit jarring at times. So this is written in 1967. And it's this Earthman who is on this planet that's populated by people who are ambisexual, which means that they could be either gender at any time. They have this kind of life cycle where they are unsexual for like 4/5 of the year, and they go through this highly sexual period where they find a partner and then mate with them or not. But then their bodies in that interaction will choose either being male or female. So you only find that out like about halfway through. But it does a weird thing to your brain. Like I think of myself as kind of a progressive person who I have, homosexual friends and stuff. I don't have a problem with, really anybody who identifies with a different gender than what they've been born with, but I still I still feel the conditioning, I guess, because this Earthman will have these interactions with these people and then realize that this person is pregnant, or this person identifies as a female or a male, and that kind of thing. And so they're as confused by him as he is by them, and just reading it, you kind of are really kind of faced up with a lot of your own preconceptions about what gender roles are in society and stuff.
Do you think is that what the author is
I think so. Yeah, I mean for a science fiction novel, you can only you can get away with just having one idea, especially in the 60s. And I think that is what she's exploring. And she does have an introduction where she says, if I could tell you what this book was about, or what I'm trying to say in it, then I wouldn't have had to write the book. Which means that she doesn't really have a point in trying to say this, but it is just something that she's exploring. So, it's kind of fun to explore that with her, I think, because it makes me feel like a bigot reading it, because I just realize about how much I still kind of buy into gender roles and all that kind of thing. But anyway, what are you reading? What's on your watch list?
Well, I just finished a show called White Gold, which is a British comedy drama series. It's cool. It's based in it's set in the 80s, and it's about double glazing salesman in the 80s, when that was like a big thing.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember people coming to the door wanting to sell double glazing. Yeah,
so it's about the salesman of that, and they're a bit shady, but making lots of money.
What, Del Boys or something? Or
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I'm googling this because I want to find out about it. Who's in it?
Did you ever watch The In-Betweeners?
Yeah.
So 2 of the guys from The In-Betweeners, I can't remember their names, are in it.
Okay. It looks like it might be in Netflix.
Yeah, we watched it on Netflix. I'm just not sure, because it's a very British show. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the American Netflix, but maybe
I'll have to check for that. That sounds good.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention is the music that we've played in every episode, the beginning and the end. I got that from a website called Free Music Archive, and it's by a group called the Devlon Lamar Organ Trio, and the song is called Between the Mustard and the Mayo, and I think it's pretty awesome. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes on my website, so you can check out their other work. So speaking of show notes and stuff, tell us about your website, where people can find out more about you. And
yeah, so you can visit me on my own website, rosslawhead.com/blog. And you can also find me on Twitter @rosslawhead and Instagram @rosslawhead. And any questions, any ideas for future shows will be entertained. We've got
probably the best way for people to talk about the podcast or to respond to the podcast is on Twitter with the hashtag Fiction Hack. Hashtag Fiction Hack.
We'll find
I'm also on there, Colin_Munro. So yeah, let us know if you're listening. That would be great.
Let us know if you're listening.
If someone,
we would
if
like to
someone
know.
is listening, that would be great.
It'd make us feel a lot better about what we do every week.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, well, let's
see you next week.
there. See you next week.
Bye.
Yeah, did you ever watch the movie 4 Lions? About the
the Chris Morris
the
directed
Chris
one?
Morris thing.
Yeah.
So one of the guys from that is in it, the one who's like a convert to Islam.
Uh-huh. Is he the one
he's done a lot of work with Steve Coogan as well.
Was he the kind of the dimmer one of the group?
No.
Okay.
He's the very angry one, the older one.
Right.
Yeah. If you haven't seen that movie, then you're going to be wondering what the hell we're talking about.
My feelings on that movie changed so much as to whether like it's in good taste or not. The Four Lions, because you can because it's really smart and really funny.
But it's obviously not in good taste. But does everything have to be in good taste?
Yeah, exactly. Like that seems to be kind of the point. So, like I say, my feelings changed on that. I don't know. Maybe we could do an episode on that, and you could walk us through that movie.
It might be controversial.
It's still pretty relevant, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. Should we wrap this up?